I would like to introduce our final guest, Lord Wajid Khan, former Faith Communities and Resettlement Minister, in conversation. Please give him a round of applause. Lord Khan, thank you very much for coming to Hyphen Festival 2025.
It's a pleasure, Burhan.
I wanted to kind of start this fireside chat by basically kind of going back to roots. You know, this is an audience made up of predominantly second and third generation British Muslims. We all have a lot in common. And I kind of wanted to start off by asking you about growing up as a Muslim in Burnley back in the 1980s. Your father was a taxi driver. Yours is quite an extraordinary journey to the centre of power. Can you expand on that, please?
Yeah, first of all, Assalamu alaikum, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you, Burhan, and congratulations to Hyphen on its festival launch. I think is a really important initiative that you've taken. So my journey, I call it a long ride. So I was born in '79, 5 siblings, father taxi driver, mum just a brilliant woman, housewife, boss of the house, and grew up in the 80s in a Burnley. Have you all been to Burnley? Anyone heard of Burnley? Yeah. We're a Premier League football team, by the way, just to let you know. So yeah, it was interesting. I actually grew up not in the wide, strong Muslim community. Most of my friends were from white community, and so I was like kind of. I think that was really important for me growing up, having that kind of diverse kind of childhood friendships with people who look different than me, who are like from a different culture from me. I think that's a really important point I want to outline. And so it's very difficult. Just to move fast forward, studied law at university, went to university, did an LLB law, came to London to do the barrister course called BPC at the time. No, BVC was Bar Vocational Course. Now it's BPTC. I'll be quite frank with you, I didn't like London. I was scared of London. So, I just went back. I left the bar course, did my master's in European law, did some projects which a couple of them won national awards on community cohesion, especially around Northern Ireland in Corrymeela. Was offered lectureship at the university where I studied. So after my master's did that, and then I wrote a program, academic program on community leadership and volunteering and community action. And I spent many, many years, and I stood for elections. I stood for elections, and this is an important point, because BNP in my town, there were 7 councillors. So my kind of involvement in politics was, to be quite blunt with you, because there were 6 or 7 BNP councillors. And I felt, some of you will understand this, some of our elders were just more focused on doing passport attestations and references, but not challenging BNP or not advocating against the hatred and the divisions that the BNP were trying to cause in my town, and that really hurt me. So I got into politics. So gladly we got rid of every BNP councillor in the borough. I stood for the European election in 2014 to get rid of Nick Griffin. He went. I joined the European Parliament. I was there for a few years there. Brexit happened. I came home. I was appointed in the House of Lords. Boris Johnson, Prime Minister, our leader, Keir Starmer. And then I've been a minister in 2024. I had 4 ministries: Minister for Faith, Communities, Resettlement, and Housing. But just an important point, I also had the great privilege of working as a taxi driver. And I say this because it taught me so much about public and dealings with, talking to people. A bit tricky sometimes on a Friday night when a couple of people had a few drinks. Big lesson in public service. And that was because at the time we didn't have any grants or loans to fund my master's postgraduate, so I had to pay for my master's myself. But it gave me a really good insight. I think my father was quite worried because I got too comfortable. I actually enjoyed taxi driving. And he thought, well, I've just done this all my life. Do I want you to do all this? And I said, no, I just need to do it to fund my studies. So it's a long ride as well. So I've also been working as a taxi driver, and I love the job, by the way. I used to get the most tips on Friday night. I'll stop there.
And you raise a couple of really interesting points there, kind of historically. You were in your 20s when the riots happened in Bradford and Burnley and Oldham and elsewhere. And you've just talked about the British National Party, who were a kind of key part of those riots, right? You know, can you kind of cast your mind back to 2001 and just let people know a little bit more here about how that affected you. What was it like being a Burnley Muslim, growing up, witnessing these riots?
Yeah.
How did it affect you?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. Just to be clear, I was actually not part of the riots, in case you kind of anyone's thinking. So I observed the riots. It was a very scary feeling, because what the riots did was, there was a number of issues in Burnley. One was inequality, and what's scary, I'm seeing this played out over again now, cost of living, people not getting a good deal in life, people can't get the housing ladder, people just making ends meet, looking towards the end of the month. Everyone, from all communities, by the way. But I felt like when things were, from the mainstream, there was like, this is not happening, and there was too much othering going on, right, which is happening now. Blaming other people for a situation, a reality in the United Kingdom, which is a cost of living, which is the government needs to do much more to fix, and it is trying, but obviously there needs to be much more focus to ensure people can have a better, more money in their pockets. So that I saw the whole misconception, rumours, total. So for me, it was the first kind of taste of fake news. That community is getting everything, we're getting nothing. These people are like that. This is what they do, and I blame that on. And this is really interesting, because at the time there was no social media there. Like, rewind this. This was without the whole Twitter, sort of Facebook. So there was there's a lot of ignorance. There was a lot of people out there sowing division. So there was political operators already operating, and in a vacuum, and they were filling the gaps themselves. And I felt so hurt, because this is a reality. I remember we had a shop at the time as well, and I remember people would look at you differently. You know there's something not right, and a lot of people in this room can relate. When you it's in the air, you feel it. People don't have to say things to you to let you know how they feel about you as a person. They just need to sometimes look at you, and you know exactly that mad person's probably thinking this. And for me, 2001 was a tense time. People that used to, neighbours, friends, colleagues, that we used to regularly have conversations, chit-chat, go out with people, and never thought anything about it. Actually, that whole experience in 2001 made me feel, actually, people are thinking that I am a problem here, that my community, people that look like me, are of a particular kind of people. And there was so much ignorance and hatred spread. But the positive side to that is that it's taking a long time, and this is a really important point I'm going to make to you. There are no short-term fixes to them challenges. It takes time, and I think there's a big role for schools to play in education. How we kind of, not just, I'm sick of this idea that you can have PE teachers teach RE or citizenship education. We need specialist people who kind of look at work with our young people in schools in particular, and share with them what it's like to be in modern 2025 Britain, and have this kind of exposure to different people. And that's why it's important what I said at the start. I was kind of grateful to have the exposure, to have, not just people that look like me, that look different than myself, but there's too many people living in the kind of comfort zones. And we've got to, if people can live the way they want to live, but we should use our opportunity in schools and education. And there's a curriculum review going on at the moment by Professor Becky Francis to look at how we can connect more people, how we can spend time learning about each other. Because the first time I came across somebody who was an Indian Muslim was at university. Kid you not? And the first time I came across somebody from a Jewish background was when I met my lawyer, who was in Manchester. So this is a challenge. We don't actually have the opportunity or the kind of the encouragement at an early age to spend time with people across the wide depth and breadth of our country.
So that's a really good point, which I want to kind of move on a little bit. You're talking about 2001.
Yeah.
If we fast forward to last year, very similar situation.
Yeah.
Riots around the UK, I think 20 towns and cities in flames, Muslim immigrant communities targeted, a lot of similarities. You were working last year as Faith Minister.
Yeah, I was. Yeah,
a large part of your job was visiting these affected communities before and after the riots. Can you explain to the audience here what kind of similarities you saw? Because some things haven't changed that much, right?
Yes, so it was the same othering, same misconceptions, same stereotypes, same ignorance, and except it was on steroids because of social media, right? That was a different catalyst. So what taken days or weeks to get this kind of negative processing of each other, othering and hatred spread, it took hours this time. And that's because there was people out there, there was a lot of commentating. I was the first minister to visit Southport after the Prime Minister and Home Secretary. I was there. It was a very difficult, really difficult experience for me. And I met police officers who were there at the scene of the initial horrific attack where we lost 3 beautiful angels and many people were injured. The same police officers went back on duty at night only to have bricks and stones thrown at them. And so I first of all, salute their bravery and courage in doing their frontline jobs and all the frontline emergency services and thoughts of the victims. So going there was a real eye opener for me. And then you're right, Burhan. I actually went to, in my time as a minister, in 14 months, I undertook 220 faith visits, not community visits, just faith visits. I had the responsibility for community cohesion. So very early on, we gave a recovery package. We gave £15 million to 20 places who were based on index, not just randomly given. There was a deprivation index and a lot of data analysis. And then further, I worked on a program called Plan for Neighbourhoods, Plan for Communities, where we give £20 million, £2 million a year for 10 years in different parts of the country, which has just been announced recently. And then we give £1.5 million to places called Pride in community, Pride in Place communities. So I worked on that initiative because I always believe you can't do community cohesion on the cheap. You just can't do it. And that was my strongest message to government. Every time I met government, number 10, I meant number 10 Downing Street colleagues. Anytime I met, I said, I'm not going to do community cohesion on the cheap. I said to the Treasury, Darren Jones, I can't do community cohesion on the cheap. I said to Rachel Reeves, everybody, I got the opportunity. And I'm glad we've put some money into communities. And that money is about making sure we take a long-term approach to fixing some of the pride problem in our communities. People thinking, like I went to a place called Middlesbrough. I met a young woman in a hijab, and she said to me, Lord Khan, we are sick to death of being consulted upon consulted upon consulted. Nothing ever changes in our communities. And they said, look at the communities, just looks the same. And that's why it's so important. One of my ministries was regional investment, to put money into communities, invest into communities. And more importantly, we need to find a way where we can have a wonderful avenue where people can come together and sit together. And together, Angela Rayner, who's working for the Deputy Prime Minister, she made a big thing of making sure we transfer power into the local communities because they know their communities well. We can't sit in Whitehall and pretend that we know what's best in Burnley or Oldham or Middlesbrough or any of the Hartlepool. We've got to make sure we speak to people, experts in that community. So just to finish off your point, your question, it was a very humbling experience to go to Southport and many, many towns and cities across the country. I never stopped doing that because there's no point sitting in the office. The only way we can get an idea and grasp understanding of the situation is actually spending time in them communities and listening to people, not just from local government, from the faith communities, from the civil society, from the voluntary organisations and community organisations. And I had the privilege to hear many, many stories. And one of my most toughest moments was when I was in a mosque in Newcastle, and two young Muslim women in hijab were saying to me, we've not been on the public transport since the disturbances. People were in real fear. And I think, that is not where we should be having our country. If one person is attacked, it's an attack on all of us.
We at Hyphen, we have interviewed women who are, Muslim women who are too scared to go shopping, to do their weekly shop, as an effect of the riots last year. That brings up another kind of interesting point about some of the challenges that the government faces here. Less than 2 months ago, Elon Musk, the owner of X, addressed the Unite the Kingdom far-right rally on a video link. And he called for two things. He called for a dissolution of Parliament and a change of government in the UK. Do you think this government can do more to tackle disinformation, misinformation, the weaponization of social media? And do you think this government should boycott some of these channels?
First of all, let me condemn them comments by Elon Musk. I think we've got to call out them comments, awful comments. We have a great history, great tradition in our country for freedom of expression, freedom to protest, and of course, that long may that tradition continue, and we'll defend that as long as we can. It's a fundamental part of our democracy. On your point, there's an online safety bill, which is already a legislation passed. At the time, I was in the senior level government meetings, and Peter Kyle, who was a tech secretary at the time, now business secretary, was very strong in making sure we speak to all the major social media platforms to ensure that hatred isn't allowed to spread, and there needs to be much more done to tackle hatred. And I think that's a work in progress. Them conversations have to continue. X is an important tool. People across government use it. The government doesn't use just X. There's a wide variety of social media. Blue Sky is coming in as well. You've got Instagram. People are using different ways to communicate their message. And we're only seeing what's happening in New York in the power of social media and knowing how to use it correctly and use algorithms carefully. But look, it is worrying, misinformation and disinformation, and it's a job for DSIT, who continue to monitor this very closely and working with partners such as the Met Police and other police forces across the country. We should call out whenever we see it. And I thought the Prime Minister was very strong after Southport. Whether you commit crime in person or online, you will face the full force of the law. And if you look at the convictions and the prosecutions and convictions, the police force and the courts working at a fast pace, I was at that particular moment, I was very proud to see that the people that was spreading here causing problems and actually physical damage to our, in the buildings in our communities were faced the harshest part of our law.
Since then, these far-right marches have become the norm around the country. There's not a weekend that goes by without a march taking place somewhere. What would you like to see the Prime Minister do to lower the temperature?
As I said previously, the freedom to protest is a fundamental part of our democracy. Let me say something very interesting to you. And this is a really interesting, deep analysis. People that marched post Southport protests, not everybody was far right. Okay, I saw women with children, children there on the marches. I think the point I need to make clear to everybody is that too many prime ministers have stood on the steps of Downing Street and said we should look after those that have left behind, or just about managing. And that's why I heard in that young woman from Middlesbrough when she said to me, we've been sick to death of being consulted. There's a chunk of our communities, our wide mainstream across the whole communities that feel the system doesn't work for them. The systems failed for them. This failed them. There's no aspiration problem. There's been a multi-generation issue of worklessness. I think them people on the march, we should talk to them people. We should find a way of how do we address their concerns. And I know there's elements of the marches that are of course, have their own purposes, but there are the people who come on marches for all different reasons, and marches are quite big. So you have a wide variety of views. We see this as we see in some of the marches here in London. There's arrests that are being made. People get hurt, police officers get attacked. So we should call out all them elements without fear or favour, be firm on that, but also find a way to ensure that people can express their views and can express their concerns, and that's absolutely their right.
How would you kind of reassure people here and in the audience and people watching on our live stream, Muslims especially, but these marches have also affected non-Muslims, as you brought up too. How would you kind of reassure themselves about their safety, their future here in the UK?
So first of all, we want to make sure that everyone is not just safe, but made to feel safe. one of the initiatives I worked on with the Home Secretary was to ensure that, that marches don't go near places of worship. That affects all people of faith, not just Jewish or Muslim communities. That affects all people of faith because that has been a concern where people have been intimidating and harassing people near places of worship, and as we saw, attacking places of worship. I mean, religious hatred is a problem, folks. But let me assure you, I personally, with the support of the Deputy Prime Minister, commissioned a definition on Islamophobia or anti-Muslim hatred, whichever the government adopts, or the recommended by the working group. So it's important that the message is that we have to make sure all of us are safe, because until all of us are safe, none of us are safe. So I reassure colleagues that there is a lot of processes going on, focus, financial support to security of mosques and in other religious places of worship. There's also money, governments supporting organisations to monitor and tackle religious hate crime. And there's quite a few organisations now that are monitoring Islamophobia or anti-Muslim hatred, whichever term you want to use. So we are constantly going to make sure that we can focus our energy on protecting people, and because everyone is important in our country. That's one of the fundamental rights: safer streets, tough on crime, and making sure that those that perpetrate this kind of behaviour face the full force of the law. What I have to encourage colleagues in the room is to report. And too many people would think, yeah, it's too much wastage of time. There's a lot of time interviews, but I'm telling you, the more people report, because it's important, because you're going to help other people not to have that same consequence or same experience as what you did. And it's sad that's happening. For some colleagues, I'll say this, I'm seeing a lot of the 70s and 80s and the incidents taking place again in 2025. It's beyond belief. Some of the language by mainstream politicians is so unfortunate, condemnable, and pretty disgraceful, to be quite frank with you.
On that definition of Islamophobia, what do you predict will happen with that? This is something that's mentioned in the press on a near daily basis. You obviously have something to say about it, some thoughts. Can you kind of look into your crystal ball? And
Burhan, just to be clear, I'm no longer government. And this is important to share with you. I mean, again, you're talking about being a minister of Muslim background. I was fascinated with my experience of 14, 15 months. To be honest, it was a 7-day job. I didn't rest. I was out and about talking to people, doing the job properly. I know there was something about me being from a Muslim background, BAME background, I've got to try ultra hard to make sure, over and above, to make sure this job is, my heart and soul, my blood, sweat and tears. And since I left, I've been trying to save my marriage, by the way, because I never saw my kids and wife for 15 months, so which I'm doing quite well, by the way, which is good news. But it's given me a breather. But I've done a lot of, I launched something called a Common Ground Resilience Fund. So people can apply, organisations can apply, small organisations, voluntary organisations in your local communities that you want to make a difference. Common Ground was my big ticket. I want to see people coming together. Again, I've talked about the work I did about plan for neighbourhoods and communities. Money's gone in as part of that process. So I've done whatever I can. But on the religious hate crime, it's quite hurtful to see that the amount of anti-Muslim hatred and Islamophobia is in this country. So my focus was, if you're going to tackle the problem, you need to define the problem. There's too many definitions out there. Everyone has so many definitions. So I wanted to bring it down to one definition where people and institutions and organizations could kind of relate to, rather than that or this one, that one. I wanted a government definition. And one of the important points is, 3 points. This definition will have, this is in our terms of reference, it'll have no limit to freedom of speech. There'll be no blasphemy law coming in. And it's just about protecting Muslims, not Islam. Religions don't need protection. They've been around for thousands of years. People should be able to criticize religion. If you don't agree with religion, fine. However, the narrative and the commentary has been I just totally ignored them 3 important points, which was actually put out in our terms of reference when we launched this commission. And so I'm hopeful the government realizes the lived experiences of British Muslims at this moment of time and adopts the definition. And I'm doing my part to use my influence and networks to ensure that we do the right thing to protect people, and we send the right message that we've got to make sure people are safe and made to feel safe. And I hope that that message is sent back to British Muslims who suffer religious hate crime, strong and loud and clear.
Thank you. I think this marks a great opportunity to take some questions from the audience. I'd like to try and ask Mohammed Abdullah, I think sitting somewhere here, wanted to ask a question earlier on. Hi, there.
So earlier, my name is Kareem. I represent an organisation called AACMA. Earlier on, we had the first God, it's gone out of my head. The first group, whatever, the first panel group, and one of the questions that was asked but was not answered was getting younger people more involved in politics. And they showed that there was a deficiency in young Muslims being involved in politics. So what would be your recommendation? Because, and I'm not a young person, okay? So for me, I feel that the Muslim community have been betrayed by politicians. Like one of the points they made this morning was about what was happening in Gaza, and the language that was used to define it to us. And it was like, it wasn't what we were seeing in front of us. So, like, bearing that in mind, how do you feel we can get more younger Muslims involved in politics?
Mr. Kareem, that's a wonderful question. We're taking just to answer that question.
Yes, please.
That's a wonderful question. I actually agree with you. We've got to get more young people involved in politics, and we've got to get young people more across the board. I'm not saying you should have a particular choice of party. Young people, British Muslims in particular, there's no homogenous group. It's such a heterogeneous group of people. There's just less than 4 million people. And I think political parties have got to do their job and try and engage people to come forward. But also, we've got to recognise, from a societal point of view, there is still a deficit of more young people from minority groups to come forward in particular. So the natural way of focus is making sure we have more civil society focus on understanding that the power of politics exists, how you could make a difference in your communities from a voluntary or civil point of view, but also from a local government or a regional government or national government point of view. Look, I've just announced initiatives that's going to hundreds of places across the country. I signed that off. That is a policy. I've just signed off, commissioned a definition on anti-Muslim hatred. I've just revived the anti-Semitism working group because I'm really big on religious hate crime. That's what my big work. I've just reset the relationship between government and faith communities as part of the team. Right? Government has just reinstated Interfaith Week to show how important faith is to our community. I mean, like this idea, sorry, it's a bit long-winded, but we wanted to ensure the relationship between government and faith is changed because too many times we've been transactional with faith communities. We only come to faith communities when we need them. And that's wrong, like an emergency service in crisis. And look at COVID. If it wasn't for mosques, churches, gurdwaras, temples, and synagogues, how would people get tested? How would people get vaccinated? So we want to make sure that we recognize that the faith has an important role. Young people across the board, you're seeing one of the areas I was working on, the elections bill, which is going to bring 16-year-olds into the fray for the first time ever, in England in particular, to vote at 16. The magic, there's no silver bullet to this, but what we've got to do is use our colleges and schools to ensure we look at the curriculum and fundamentally change the kind of perspective, how to make sure politics is relevant and understood at a young age. Because I tell you something now, people in Burnley might ask random young people, they say, who collects your bins? They have no idea, right? There's local politics. People don't realize how things work, and we've got to address that issue. And so what we've got to really get to is use education, youth clubs, other support networks, but in particular school and colleges, to have a really clear focus on the power of politics, how you as a young person can get involved in politics, how you as a young person can move up the ladder. I didn't have no mentor in life. I just struggled my way through it. But what I spend my time now doing is spend my time speaking to young people in schools, because I need to ensure that to that 9, 10-year-old, I can see more people look like me, or have more opportunities to get involved in mainstream politics and play a role in making a contribution to their country.
Any more questions? Hi.
Thank you. I know it's lunch soon, so I don't want to be the barrier between food and conversation.
Sorry, what's your name?
My name's Sabra Media. I'm an imam and content creator online.
Hi.
First of all, thank you for your words, and also you mentioned you can't do community cohesion on the cheap. I think that's really important. And also, you mentioned about empowering communities on the ground to make things better, and I think that's really important. I've got 2 questions, if you allow. My first question is, how do we, on a grassroots level, encourage community cohesion? And number 2, it's frustrating, but what is the delay in defining anti-Muslim hate? Because my problem is, as a faith leader, I've engaged with the Jewish community many a times, and really good relationships with them. I went to Manchester and spoke to Channel 4 about the attack on the synagogue, because I'm from Manchester.
Yeah.
We are very easy to jump to any issues against the Jewish community, and rightly so. We should stand united to call it anti-Semitism. But my upset and worry and frustration is that time is taken to define anti-Muslim hate. Thank you.
I mean, 2 brilliant questions. First of all, what we've got to do much more on the grassroots level is actually, we've got to actually, like I said to you, it shouldn't have to take, to get to university to get to know people who from similar faith, from different dynamics. I mean, this is, for me, we've got to make sure we have the opportunity to. So the point I'm going to make to you, Imam Sahib, is we have to ensure that we interact with people that look different than us, okay? So there's 3, we're going to go into academic mode here. There's 3 types of social capital. One is bonding, second is bridging, and the third is linking. Bonding is getting networks and relationships with people that are similar to us. So if I'm a Liverpool supporter, so sorry about this, guys. So if all I spend my time is speaking to Liverpool supporters, I wouldn't really know exactly how my life is about, what it's like to be an Arsenal supporter. God help them, right? But bridging is me spending time with people who are from different values, different race, different background, different religion, different creed. And linking is another important part of social capital, is how do you connect with people, communities who can have power, access to people with power, so they can have access to making sure their community gets better. So for me, if you don't interact with different people, you don't get to know them. And if you don't get to know them, you'll never understand them. And that is a fundamental problem. So how do we do this? We need to ensure that we connect with like-minded people from different organizations, different religions, and have that connection. I did this on a grand scale. So one of the initiatives I did this was, I don't know if you heard about something called the Drumlanric Accords, where we had Jewish denominational faith leaders with Muslim denominational faith leaders. We took them all the way to Scotland at Drumlanric Castle, kindly hosted by the Duke of Buccleuch. And you can Google this, Drumlanric Accords, to get Muslims and Jewish faith leaders together to discuss how in the United Kingdom we can spread more commonalities, more kind of working together relationships, how we can ensure that whatever happens in different parts of the world doesn't feed through in our communities through hatred and intolerance of each other. And that was an initiative which was really successful. We actually got invited by His Royal Highness King Charles at Buckingham Palace. My concern was, and this answers your question, there's no point doing it at the top hierarchical, where grassroots, there's so much difficult conversations that need to be had. So we've got to have them difficult conversations, and we've got to reach out to ensure that we can get young people accessible and in front of people, other communities and their backgrounds in particular, and we can spread that kind of commonality, because there's so much that's common to each one of us, rather than that's different from each other. I mean, look at Muslims and Jews. Out of all the faiths, that is the most correlating faiths in terms of theological perspective. On your question of anti-Muslim hatred, I'm going to be quite clear with you. I'm frustrated as you. right? And if I be quite candid here, my biggest frustration as being the minister in government was there's the process of getting some really good initiatives and policies through and getting them in reality to make sure that they have a real profound effect on communities. So that whole, if you look at the biggest criticism of people tell me of government, is there's so much good legislation that's been going on, really good initiatives, but however, people are not feeling it yet. So that is mechanics and machinery of number 10 operation to ensure we can get things done faster. So the frustration's there. I started, if I'll be quite honest with you, I thought about the chair, Dominic Grieve. I wanted Dominic Grieve. I was quite kind of hard-nosed about this. I want Dominic. Dominic's got skin in the game, got legal experience, and I'll be quite frank with you, I know Dominic knew how to handle the tough press because he has faced it all during Brexit. So I'm quite hopeful. My understanding is it's going to be very soon. I'm pushing hard. But you're right, it shouldn't have taken this long. That's one of the first pieces of work I did when I got into government to tackle this scourge of religious hate crime towards Muslims, and as well as my other wider work across all faiths. This is not happening at the expense of other religions. Everyone, there's support out there for all religions. And I think it's important to say this. Positively, when I left government, I was very humbled and kind, just very, very appreciative of all the letters I got. The most letters came from the Jewish community. I was saying this before, and because I had a really profound relationship with the communities, all communities. I mean, I did 220 faith visits. I met Zoroastrians, Jains, Baha'is, Quakers, Buddhists, all the not just the main, religions, everybody. So I think that's going to happen quite fast. And I'm not going to sugarcoat this. It's taken far too long. And that's one of the lessons that we've got to learn as government, and my government, who I work for, to ensure that process is much faster. Because if it takes this long for an important policy like this, then people would feel frustrated, and they're likely to feel frustrated. But I'm just going to say to you, watch this space.
Can we take one more question? Hi.
Thank you very much. My name is Fiza Qureshi. I'm the CEO of the Migrants' Rights Network.
I didn't catch your name, sorry.
Fiza Qureshi from the Migrants' Rights Network, sorry. This is a topic that has probably been skirted around a little bit, around immigration specifically, because obviously it is the hottest topic at the moment. It's the most controversial. It is being manufactured as a massive issue, particularly Muslims being that threat to the UK, and the whole kind of great replacement theory as this is extremely prevalent in the far right, but you're seeing it parroted by some in government and some of the politicians, where it manifests in we need better integration, or there are legitimate concerns around migration. So it means that we're seeing that Muslims, particularly migrants, are kind of like doubling down on proving their worth and deservingness of being in the UK. And I want, and how they have integrated, right? So this always have to prove that, I speak English, I pay taxes, etc. And I was wondering how we can move away from this argument of having to prove our worth in the UK constantly, in terms of these integration narratives, and how you might try and push that forward.
Fiza, there's a lot stacked in that question, a lot of themes. So I was a minister responsible for resettlement. So my job was to resettle people from Afghanistan, Ukraine, Hong Kong, and other areas in particular. So I was a fundamental part of that MEDVAC scheme, Palestinian children coming to the UK for medical treatment. I was pretty much part of that whole process. My view is on this is clear. I mean, I'm talking for myself. I think the government has to absolutely right to tackle illegal migration. That's something that is wrong, it's illegal, so people shouldn't be here. That's the reality. I'm really concerned about the language that's coming out. I mean, the island of strangers speech was wrong. That shouldn't have happened. I get the point what the Prime Minister was trying to make, but the choice of words were just not the right choice of words, especially if it's been used in the past by people trying to sow division. So we've got to be honest and look at this from a perspective that there's a big housing crisis. There are people living in hotels. That's not fair on people living in hotels. And it's concerning for people have hotels used in different ways, in the past, and they're seeing this happening. So how we do resettlement is important. So one of the things I did was make resettlement as part of cohesion, because to ensure that people came over had the best opportunity in life. They're people suffering, and the people that helped the United Kingdom when we were at war. And it's only right to oblige and to people that supported us when we needed them, helped us, whether that's interpreters, whether that's just analysts in Afghanistan. So my focus is that we've got to celebrate each other's, rather than, you're right, the point you're making, let's not be defensive. Look at the NHS, right? If it wasn't for migration, the NHS wouldn't be where it is now, one of the greatest institutions in the country, even though it has challenges and there's funding issues. We've got to celebrate the contribution of migrants. Everyone in this room, the parents, grandparents, have played a role to rebuild this country. Look at the millions of Muslims that fought in the war. And that's why I'm going to tell you now, one of the pieces of work I did was to launch a Muslim war memorial, because people often forget when it came to war, our country in war, World War I and II, Muslims volunteered, didn't get paid, volunteered from the subcontinent to protect the United Kingdom. There's too much, again, discourse where there's no difference now at the moment, the way commentators and some of the far-right attacks on Muslims in particular and people of colour, they look at people like they think I'm an asylum seeker. There's no differentiation of people that have been born here and lived here for God knows how many years. They've all been grouped into one category, which is very dangerous. So we've got to fight back, champion each one's a contribution to this country. This is the greatest multi-ethnic country in the world. I stand by that. And long may that continue. People try to sow division, will keep sowing division, and it happens in cycles again. But we've got to be strong, unashamedly proud British, citizens of this country. We might have different faiths, all of us. We might have different colours, might have different ethnicities, but that is what United Kingdom is best. So I say this with the caveat, there has to be more support for refugees and asylum seekers to learn English through English language and contribute to the country. You've got to give people, if you're going to support people, you need to give them mechanisms and resources to contribute to the country. I met so many amazing success stories. I visited Afghan families, Hong Kongers. I visited Ukrainian schools, and I found out people are making already a difference to this community. The life in the UK test is not fit for purpose, right? Like I can give you that test now. I'm telling you now, only few of you have passed that test. I don't know the answers. Who was the king in 1918 or 1856, whatever? Who was the prime minister then? Like, we've got to work out how do we make sure we can make practical life in 2025 for Afghan women or young women who are coming to this country, rightly so, through refugee status. How do we make sure they can best contribute to this country? I think the rhetoric out there is difficult, dangerous, but we can't, my last point is we can't out-reform reform. We should stick to our values, what we stand for. You never win a war on other people's territory. Be what we stand for, our values as a party, and keep focusing what we stand for, and that's how we win this.
Lord Khan, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.